So good morning, everybody. My name is Cristiane Pilon. I'm a peanut physiologist with the University of Georgia on Stripling campus, and today I'm going to share some of our results. It's actually preliminary data on water management strategy in peanut for improved seed quality, seed physiological quality. And before moving on, I want to recognize my collaborators. Wes Porter, which is an important piece of this work, my PhD student, Leticia Moreno, Calvin Perry, Bob Camerai, and Tim Brennan. And talking about irrigation in peanut, we know it's not, there's nothing new about drought issues in peanut and how irrigation is critical. It's very important for peanut production, especially for seed production, which irrigation is required. And because drought is becoming more and more frequent and intense over the years, it's really critical to work on something to understand drought effects on the plants very well, and also ways to mitigate this issue. So if we look, I was selfish enough to circle Georgia State here, but this is a graph from the U.S. Drought Monitor, and this is from 2018. And if we look here, we can focus on Georgia or even look at other states, because we know that irrigation is important and not available on many peanut producing states. So, but if we look at this date, this specific date, it was just a random date I picked, but it was during flowering and fruiting. And the graph is basically white, which indicates that there's no drought. If we move to 2019, which is the same date or a date before, because they don't have the graph available for the same, they didn't have for the same date, but we see some yellow spots, which indicates that those parts of the state were abnormally dry. And if we move to 2020, we see that about half of the state is yellow, which indicates that drought was progressing over the years. Of course, I don't have the graph for 2021, but and I don't know how the weather is where you guys are, but here in Tipton, it's been raining every day. So the situation, I don't think this is going to follow the same trend. I don't think it's going to be abnormally dry by the end of July, but excess of water is also very critical for peanut production, right? So talking about that, here are just some examples of the negative effects of excess of water in seed development. So early in the season or during pod development, if there is excess of water available in the soil, the pods are going to swell up in crack. And later during pod development, the hole becomes very thin and they break, and sometimes we can even see some germination inside the pod. And the seed coat also gets pink or dark pink. On the other hand, if we have lack of water, so if we don't have enough water, especially later in the season, we can have issues with aspergillus, right? And that can lead to aflatoxin development. So there's always a need for a balance, or a right amount of water for the plant. And this is not something new, but if we have both situations, a drought followed by excess of moisture, we also have issues for the plants, right? So what happens when the pods or the plants are under drought? This little guy here called funiculus will dry out, the seed will detach from the pods, and then whenever they receive water, the seeds are gonna understand that, okay, I'm ready for germination. So they start the germination process, and they they think that they need to develop a new seedling, which is the case here, that he So managing water differently, we can have different responses from the plant. So this was a work we did in collaboration with Craig Queen, Corley Holbrook, and Peggy. And we just planted some peanuts in those boxes, which was black inside, not to affect root development. And then it was in this specific case, it was Georgia O6G, but we had two other genotypes also. And we hold water for 21 days, starting at 21 days after planting. And the root system, we can compare here a well-watered plant and a water-stressed plant, and we can see that the water-stressed plant was much more vigorous than when the plants received optimum water. So they got kind of lazy and they didn't develop a very robust root system, and even the distribution was not very good. And here we can see a cross-section of a root tip, and looking closer, this is a well-watered plant, and this is from our drought-stressed plant. And those circles here are the xylem vessels, and we didn't see any difference between in the number of xylem vessels between the treatments. And here in these pictures, we may see that the numbers are not exactly the same, but statistically they were not different. But the diameter of the vessels were different. So a drought-stressed plant, the diameter was smaller, so the vessels were smaller, which made them more efficient uptaking water from the soil. So even if the soil had less water, they were still able to uptake the water. This work is still not published, but hopefully we're going to get it out soon. And then moving to another study we did on drought, but in this case was at peak flowering and fruiting, and it was more related to seed physiological quality. This is a study from one of my PhD students, and I'm not going to go into too much details here, but we had, the work was conducted at the National Peanut Lab in Dawson in collaboration with Marshall Lamb and Chris Buds and Don Sorensen. And we had an irrigated plot and drought for 30 days, starting at 81 days after planting, which would be peak flowering and fruiting. And then we collected the seeds at harvest normally, and we split them into the different maturity classes. And here it's actually round 1 and round 2, because we got the brown class and we divided into 2 subclasses just to see if there was any difference within each maturity class. And we can see here, especially in the yellow, that less seeds germinated and they were less vigorous, because we can see that the radicle didn't grow as much as the plants that were under drought. If you want to see a little bit more about this work, there's a poster. My PhD student has a poster on this work presented at APRES. So, but this indicates that we can play with the plant or with water in the plant, and they can respond to that, right? So we know early season and during peak flowering that we can manage water differently and get different responses from the plant, and that led to this study. So it was a study from West Porter. He had it going on for a few years, but we have a field planted in Camilla with lateral irrigation system that irrigates the plots independently. We used the cultivar Georgia C.M. We planted in May, and then we had 8 combinations with 3 different soil water tension levels, which would be 20 kilopascal, and that's considered dry for peanuts, 45 kilopascal, which is considered optimum, and West Porter has other work indicating that this was optimum for peanut, and 70 kilopascal, which is dry. So we had those combinations, and we also had a dryland which we didn't apply any irrigation, well, except for a little bit during planting, well, right after planting. And we divided into 3 different stages: early season, and then flowering and fruiting in late season, just to see how that would affect seed quality. So starting at looking at yield first. So this is the pod yield and the different water management strategies. And we don't see a lot of different separation in yield here, except for the dryland, which was lower. It was not an extremely low dry year, but it was still, it was maybe severe enough to cause a decrease in yield. And this treatment also had a lower yield, and it was mainly because we kept the plants very wet early season, and that means that the plants got lazy and they didn't develop a very good root system, and that affected later on. But here, we got this higher yield when we time acclimated the plants, so we got a little bit of moderate drought early season, and then we kept the plants very wet or wetter than the optimum. And we thought that we would get some penalty in yield, but we didn't. But that doesn't mean that it's the best option, right? But comparing with optimum irrigation in prime acclimating early season, they were not statistically different, but of course the yield here was a little bit lower. Looking at the irrigation water use efficiency, we see that this is much less efficient because we need, let's say the grower would need to spend to apply much more water, and it's not full. We don't have the, I will not present the economical analysis here, but this is not for example. Whereas this is good, it is not bad at all. This was not appropriate because keeping the plants dry later in the season is a high risk for aflatoxin, so we don't want that. Anyways, then we wanted to do the germination test on those, but it's a very time-consuming analysis that we need to do because we need to harvest all the pods, blast them, separate them into the different maturity classes, manually open them, and then do the germination test. So we couldn't do that with all of the treatments. At this point, we didn't have labor enough. So we decided to get only a few of the treatments to run the germination test. And this is what we got for the germination. So we can see here for the white bar, which is the prime acclimation, early season, and then optimum water, it seemed that the seeds were developing, or they were acquiring the germination component during seed development reasonably. And as we confirmed with Leticia's project, when we keep the plants dry for development, we accelerate the acquisition of germination. It was higher here, but not always. This doesn't indicate always that it's a very good thing, right? Because it's only the germination, so we need to see the other components, vigor, longevity, so how long those plants can be stored without affecting the germination potential. There are other components that need to be checked. So we also checked the percentage of normal seedlings, and they follow pretty much the same trend except for the brown class, which the seeds from this treatment with drought, the development, the seed development, they had lower percentage of normal seedlings. Here are some pictures just to indicate, of course, this is just one of the replications, so it may not reflect exactly what the average had, but here we can see that keeping this is optimum, right? Prime acclimating the plants and then keeping optimum water amount. We got good germination here, but a little bit lower germination than keeping the plants underground, right? And if you keep them wet, they have some abnormal seeds. So in conclusion, or just a summary of those preliminary results, applying too much water will not be cost effective regardless of the plant stage. So we really thought we would have some yield penalty. We didn't, but West Porter in previous work, he found penalty in yield for when we apply more water than what the plant needs. So we still need to that, of course, but applying a moderate drought early season will prime acclimate the plants, and that's going to be a good thing for the plant if they for potential adverse condition later in the season. And then this early season moderate stress will improve or will help with germination and percent of minimal seedlings. But again, this is a preliminary study. We still don't know if it's actually the physiological quality that is changing or if that's just the whole color that is not developing. And if that's the case, then we have other problem, other thing to work with. But this is still in progress. That's something we have in the field this year. We're conducting the exact same experiment, and we're excited about those results and knowing that we can play with water and get different response for the plant, and especially related to seed quality, which is pretty cool to me. So that's what I had to share. Thank you so much. I want to thank Georgia Peanut Commission for funding this project, Georgia Seed Development for donating the seeds, and my group for the hard work they do. Thank you so much.
Okay, thanks a lot. I think for time's sake, we'll probably move on. And there was a question or two, but we'll let you contact Cristiane and get those answers. Thanks a lot.